Hello there, it's Susie Walker here, Editor-in-Chief of Psychology's magazine for our 1 p.m. broadcast, and I'm so delighted to be joined by Beren Aldridge, a UKCP therapist and founder of the Porchlight practice. And I know that you support lots of people with mental health challenges and just, in therapeutic ways. So welcome, Beren.
Thank
Lovely
you,
to see
Susie.
you.
Yeah, it's really nice to be here.
I'm really looking forward to learning all about our inner child and how we can support it through these kind of strange and wonderful times we're
Mm,
about to go through. So
mm,
Psychology's magazine, we have the Psychology's Connected community, and I'm trying to bring as much wisdom and experts and coaches and therapists, as many people as we can, Baron, just to kind
mm,
of help us navigate and use this opportunity, this pause, to be able to learn about ourselves and our own self-development and sort of, let's see how we can maybe use it as an opportunity to grow rather than
mm,
collapsing on ourselves.
mm,
You
mm,
work with a kind of therapy called transactional analysis,
mm,
which at the core of it has working with the inner child. Can
mm.
you tell me a little bit about the inner child and how we can, what kind of effect is this crisis having on our inner child?
Yeah, I can. What I really like about transactional analysis is that it has at its heart the this idea that our personality isn't one single fixed entity, but we change depending on the circumstances we're in and the environment that we're experiencing. And whilst most of us, most of the time, spend our time in what transactional analysts call the adult ego state or the adult state of the personality, which is the part of us in the here and now that's rational, that can see the big picture and make good choices. Also, inside of us is how we used to be when we were younger. I rather like, I always keep this on my desk, like a Russian doll.
Oh
And the
yeah,
inside, yeah, inside a
yeah,
Russian doll, you'd have all these younger selves,
yeah,
um, right down to the itty bitty little sort of tiny one. Now,
yeah.
inside me, therefore, yeah, I'm 46, but I have my 30-year-old self, my 20-year-old self, my 10-year-old self, my 5-year-old self, etc. And depending on what's going on in the world, those younger aspects of who I used to be can get reactivated. And I can be in the supermarket right now shopping, and then somebody pushes past me, not observing social distancing. And my 6-year-old self is suddenly the one that's pushing the trolley, feeling vulnerable and scared, not knowing how to speak up to that grown up that just pushed past me. And it can then leave me thinking and feeling and behaving like a 6-year-old for a few minutes in the store. And that's obviously not good because you wouldn't trust your 6-year-old to do your weekly shop. So
You eat a lot of sweets, obviously.
yeah, I'd have a lot of sweets in my trolley.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think right now I'm thinking a lot about how to help myself and help other people to soothe and settle and understand these younger aspects of who we are because they get so activated at times of stress and fear.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, what I hear a lot these days is this thing called being triggered. I was triggered.
Mm,
And I
mm,
think
mm,
that's a really good, it's great that we're aware that we're being triggered. So
mm,
take us through the process. If so, for example, you're pushing the trolley, someone comes near you and you think, oh
mm,
my goodness, and then
mm,
you suddenly aware that maybe a part of you is being, a younger self is being triggered. Then
mm,
what do we
mm.
do? So first of all is recognizing it, I suppose. That's the first thing
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
important. And then what?
Mm.
Then what do we do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first step, like you say, is recognition. So, um, what does our body start to feel like when we're moving out of our adult ego state into a younger, remembered state? So, like you say, to use that word, a younger me is triggered. So, I know that my 6-year-old self used to get very nervous on his way to school. So my heart rate starts to go up, my breathing increases, I feel anxious and tense. The way I speak starts to be quicker, more clipped. And with practice, I can notice that I'm shifting. My personality is shifting and changing in response to my environment. And that's my 6-year-old self, whereas my 16-year-old self might be quite rebellious and argumentative,
Yeah.
might want to take that person who shoved past me to task and start a bit of a fight in the supermarket. And
Yes.
so getting to know when these feelings start to rise up in us, this is this aspect of who I am. And then moving on to having some strategies for soothing, settling, calming, accompanying that inner child. And my inner child could be 6 to 16, but it could be 36. It's any age that I used to be. Does that make sense, Susie?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And do we
Mm,
need to know what I think you're right. I definitely have a younger self, like a 5 year
mm,
old. I definitely have a rebellious one that does
mm.
that.
Yeah.
And and I think I have quite a maybe a kind of I used to be a drama queen. Hard to believe when I was in my 20s, and now I'm better at keeping the
Mm,
drama on the page rather than
mm,
out in
mm,
the real world. So there's
mm.
definitely at least three inner children that I know in my.
Absolutely.
Do we need to know which one it is? Because I suppose we do. Just thinking about it, because my younger self, my baby, will need
Mm,
different strategies to my teenager, to my
mm,
drama queen, let's say.
mm, mm.
So do we need to figure that out first? How would we work through that? Obviously, work with a therapist, which we were very keen to promote at Psychologies, but
Mm. Not necessarily. I think that the really terrific thing about transactional analysis is it's very easy to understand and apply to yourself. You can buy a book or read information on a web page and really begin to understand yourself. I would say that you don't even have to. The first step doesn't have to be about getting to know those inner child states, though of course that's very valuable. If I go back to what I said at the beginning, that most of us spend most of our time in our adult state, which is rooted in the here and now. The first thing to do is to come back to the here and now from wherever you've got sent to. So someone
yes,
pushes past me and I notice I don't feel like I did 3 minutes ago. The first thing to do is to come back into the here and now, which is why mindfulness is such a valuable concept, because that brings us back into the here and now by focusing on our breathing, our bodily sensations, by looking around us and paying attention to all of the sensory input that's arriving in that moment. We draw our energy back from this past state, this 6-year-old or 16-year-old, and we return to being a 46-year-old man doing his shopping in the supermarket. So I would say that the very first aspect to working with our inner child is noticing when we've shifted state from the person we were, and then use our awareness of the moment, the here and now, to come back to being that person again.
sure.
Um,
And for people who don't know about mindfulness,
hmm,
what are the tricks to coming back?
yeah, that's a great question. Mindfulness it's a simplistic definition of mindfulness is the practice of being in the present moment.
Yeah.
So anything that you do that brings your sensory awareness into the present moment is going to strengthen and return you to your adult ego state, your adult personality. So taking a deep breath and noticing it, and then letting it go and feeling what that feels like.
Yeah.
Your breath is always in the here and now. If you're noticing your breath, you're in the present moment.
Yeah.
And that for me is the bedrock of bringing yourself back into your adult state, is to take a deep breath and let it out slowly, and
Yeah.
then notice your body, notice the ground you're standing on, the feeling of your feet on the floor, your bottom in a seat, notice the
Yes.
supermarket shelves, the colors, etc.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
but I will go back to your question, Susie. The more you understand these different child ego states, like you say, kind of the difference between this really little
Yes.
you and say a kind of rebellious teenage you,
Yes.
then we can be more nuanced, because I know when I'm anxious and frightened, if I picture my grown-up self holding the hand of my young child self, I can imagine feeling soothed by my grown-up self. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so we've got
Yeah.
a question coming in
Yeah.
from Wendy, and I think I get this too. So the problem I
Mm,
have is that I'm too busy doing stuff. It's only when after the event that I will recognize my state.
mm.
And I have trouble in the here and now when everything is going on around me, and I totally get that. So it's
Yeah,
that thing
it's a great question
using
from Wendy.
your. So what you're saying is, so bring ourselves back to the present.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, I mean, I think most of us will recognize we're like
Mm.
going a little bit nuts, or going a little
Yeah.
bit triggering and
Mm.
or arguing or being rebellious or being a drama queen or being a
Yeah.
victim, and we haven't caught it fast enough.
Yeah.
So
Well,
and then
I
I
would
think
say,
then you're going to talk about hopefully strategies for soothing and settling, as you
mm,
talked
mm.
about. But
I think it's never too late. So as soon as you notice that that's what's happened, then use your awareness of the present moment to calm yourself and settle yourself, and practice doing that when you're not stirred up. So making 5 minutes each day to sit quietly, to notice your breathing, to notice your surroundings. It's like building up a muscle. It's
yes,
strengthening a muscle so that
yes,
when you need it, you've got it there.
yes,
And if the first time you try it, you do it after you've already dissolved into tears. And then the second time you try it, it's when you are dissolving into tears. The third time, it might be just before you dissolve into tears. And it is a practice,
yes,
bringing yourself into the present moment. Um, but yes, I think, to take Wendy's question, the more you can get to familiar with that inner child and its own characteristics. Like I said, I know that mine gets anxious, it gets frightened, it gets um, tongue-tied, but sometimes it also gets really bossy and controlling,
yes.
and really expects everyone to do what I want them to do. And the more I get familiar with those changes, the quicker I'm going to spot it when it happens.
Yeah. So
Mm.
again, so when you're saying it's a practice, and I think that's definitely my experience of
Yeah,
it. It
yeah,
is. I remember when I first learned about it, it felt like, uh, it's a marathon that you're running here
mm,
almost.
mm,
You're
mm,
learning to build up your, as you say, build up your fitness.
mm.
So once we become aware of it and we can bring ourselves back in the moment, how do we get our adult self to soothe that inner child or soothe?
Yeah,
When I'm noticing there's a lot of wailing going on with my inner child at the moment of
mm,
I'm scared. I don't know. I'm so worried
yeah,
about what's going to happen in the world. All of these,
mm,
there's a lot of fear
yeah,
going on, and it
mm,
feels very helpless and powerless, which feels a very, very, which goes around and round and round, which
mm,
because then that makes me feel even worse.
mm,
So it's, how do I make that so I'm aware of it? I
mhm,
bring myself to the present, and how do I
mm.
soothe and settle myself, or that part of myself?
Yeah. Okay. So everybody is going to be different, and this is where working with a therapist is useful, because of course you learn what works for you. But what can often work, as I said to you before, is if you picture in your mind, if you have a visual kind of mind, an image of your grown-up self now, and then you picture your younger self, and you picture the two of them together, and you might picture your grown-up self holding the hand of the younger self, putting an arm around them, and you might say to yourself the kind of things you would say to a youngster if they were worked up. You wouldn't put them down, but you might say, hey, it's okay. This is going to be over soon. We're not going to be at the supermarket for very long. Take a deep breath. Remember that you're loved. Remember that I'm here for you right now. We've often hear people talking about having mantras, and the use of a mantra is very powerful if you think of it as the adult here and now part of you, reaching back and talking to the younger you, and saying the things to the younger you that maybe weren't said to you when you needed them back then in the past.
Yeah,
Another thing that's quite powerful is that you can just put your hand just on your neck and upper chest,
Yeah.
and and let some warmth build up there between your hand and your upper body.
Yeah.
And it's like that grown-up self putting a
Yeah.
hand on the younger
Yeah.
self and connecting with them. And
Oh, I like that.
it yeah, and if you're in the store, or if you're driving in your car, or if you're sitting at home, as we all should be sitting at home right now, it's a
Yeah.
very inobtrusive thing to simply place your hand there, one hand or two hands, and let some warmth build up. And you might picture that warmth reaching inside you and reaching into the tension and the anxiety and dissolving it and settling it, while you breathe. And that can be a really powerful way of connecting with the younger you.
Yes.
Mm,
I think I will try that. I think that's a lovely practice to try.
mm,
I'm very much a words person and a mantra person,
mm,
and so what I notice is the thoughts that I'm having, that I can really, I'm much more skilled now at accessing a positive, nurturing voice in my head. Come on, honey, it's going to be okay. You've done this before.
yeah,
We're going to do it again. I call it
yeah,
self-coaching almost.
yeah, yeah,
Remember when I
yes.
took the new job at psychologies, I was so terrified, and all the way in and all the way out, I used to go, "You can do this. It's okay.
Mm,
You've done this
mm.
before." And it would just be that soothing voice. But I know that it's taken
Well,
me.
and
Sorry.
I was just going to say, Susie, that in transactional analysis, we talk about that as being the inner parent. That we not only do we have an inner child that can be both helpful and unhelpful, we have an inner parent that likewise can be helpful or unhelpful. And if we had another time to chat, I might talk to you about the inner parent. But there you've got that example of you creating for yourself a nurturing, positive parent figure for that child in you.
I mean, the question I suppose I wanted to ask you, a final question,
Mm,
because we haven't got long left, but
yeah.
just this idea of when people haven't got access to, it's taken me a long time to get access to
Mm,
that sort of nurturing inner parent.
yeah.
And before that, I had a very critical, very,
Mm,
and quite, it could be at times a quite abusive kind of voice,
mm,
which
mm,
would
yeah.
spiral me down, and a lot of shaming and that kind of
Yes.
thing. It's taken, through the self development, through therapy, through
Mm,
working on myself, I've learned to
mm,
build myself up rather than. But
mm,
if someone's
me
coming to
too.
at the beginning,
Mm,
um, what can they do to learn the skill of building as parenting in a nurturing way rather than in a critical way?
yeah, that's a great question, Susie. There are two things I would say to that. One is, I think you've almost answered your own question, which is that we practice finding nurturing words. We practice, and this can be very helpful if we talk to someone else, so they can help us spot the way we might be being critical, and we can identify how to be positive with ourselves, how to be kind with ourselves, how to say encouraging things. But like I said earlier, that there's a value in identifying the um, the inner child. Similarly, if you identify that inner parent, then you can use your adult in the here and now to stand up to it and to say things like, "Hey, we don't speak to people like that. You wouldn't speak to someone else like that. Why are you speaking to yourself like that?" So you use that here and now adult part of you, almost like a referee between the inner child and the inner parent.
I mean, there's just an interesting question here. Sorry to just riff. It
Mm,
says, what if you
please.
despise your inner child and blame him for being bullied? That's really interesting. So what we're talking there is that
Mm,
is it the same thing that the parent in the here and now, or your grown up self would say,
mm,
hey,
yes. Yes.
you would
So
find it in the inner voice.
yes, so Magdalena's question is really well put, and what she's getting at is, I've been talking to you in this session about when our inner child gets activated. What she's talking about is when that inner parent gets activated. And our work with an inner parent is slightly different to working with an inner child. It's where we use the adult here and now part of us to stand up to that critical voice and to say, hey, we don't speak to children like that. That's not helpful. And to use that adult to find a way to find love and care and affection for the young person we used to be. and that can be really difficult. I really don't want to trivialize what we're talking about. This can be the work of months and years.
Yes.
And transactional analysis, whilst it's got these simple concepts, is a very sophisticated psychological theory. There's a comment in your chat room from Jill about material that you can read, and there's a terrific book which is called TA Today, which is a basic introductory book to transactional analysis, which I would always recommend to my clients. It's available on sort of any reputable bookseller.
Yeah, no, wonderful. And also, just can I just do a plug for you? You're doing a transactional course online in June, and the details are below for Porchlight, your practice, so they can find out more about that if you're interested
Yeah,
in that.
thank you.
But this is just actually really so useful, Beren. Thank you so much for your time today. I mean, just that idea of remembering, to bring yourself back to the present.
Yeah.
And finding those words as self-soothing words, or I love this, literally, because that's something, there's nothing, I mean, right now when we can't touch each other, and I love this idea of being able to just give you, it's almost like a touch
Yeah.
to
So
yourself, basically.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, beautiful. That's really lovely, really lovely. Beren, thank you so much for your wisdom today.
Oh, thank you for the
Really,
opportunity to talk to you and
yeah,
your readers. Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much. Take care, and
Yeah.
I'll speak to you again soon, I hope.
Yeah.
Bye
Go well.
bye.
Bye bye.